Millionaire CEO sees a poor, humble bride rejected at a bus stop and changes her life forever. Quick before the story starts, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. The rain pounded against the windshield of the sleek black Bentley as it glided through Manhattan's streets. Inside, sheltered from the raging storm, sat Maxwell Reed, his steely gray eyes focused on the road ahead. At 38, Maxwell had built Blackwood Enterprises from nothing into an empire that commanded respect and fear throughout the business world. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating his sharp features and the perfect cut of his custom suit. He adjusted his platinum cufflinks, a habit he'd developed whenever deep in thought. 5 years had passed since Catherine's death, yet the emptiness in his penthouse remained as vast as ever. The only difference was that he'd grown accustomed to the silence. Alternative route recommended due to flooding on 5th Avenue, announced the navigation system, interrupting his thoughts. Maxwell frowned but followed the detour, steering his luxury vehicle into a neighborhood he rarely visited, a place where buildings showed their age and storefronts lacked the polish of his usual surroundings. He tightened his grip on the leather steering wheel, uncomfortable with the unfamiliar territory. As the Bentley cruised down the rain-soaked street, windshield wipers working frantically against the downpour, something caught his eye. A flash of white against the gray backdrop of the storm. Maxwell slowed the car, his curiosity piqued despite himself. There, huddled beneath the meager shelter of a bus stop, sat a woman in a wedding dress. The once pristine white gown now clung to her frame, partially translucent from the rain. Her dark hair had escaped whatever elaborate style it had been in earlier, now hanging in wet tendrils around her face. She sat perfectly still, her posture maintaining a quiet dignity despite her bedraggled appearance. Ridiculous, Maxwell muttered to himself, preparing to drive on. The woman was clearly in some sort of trouble, but that wasn't his concern. New York was full of stories, full of people with problems. He didn't build his fortune by stopping for every sob story on a street corner, yet he couldn't take his foot off the brake. Something about her, perhaps the stark contrast between the ruined wedding dress and her composed demeanor, held him transfixed. In his world of calculated risks and strategic decisions, this momentary hesitation was entirely out of character. Before he could rationalize his way out of it, Maxwell found himself pulling the Bentley to the curb. He sat there for a long moment, rain drumming on the roof, questioning his own actions. With a decisive movement that had closed million-dollar deals, he reached for his umbrella and stepped out into the storm. The woman didn't look up as he approached, her gaze fixed on some distant point across the street. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd initially thought, perhaps late 20s, with delicate features and skin pale from cold or shock or both. "Excuse me," Maxwell said, his voice cutting through the sound of the rain. "Do you need assistance?" Her eyes finally lifted to meet his, deep brown and filled with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Not quite despair, but something adjacent to it. Recognition, perhaps, not of him specifically, but of a kindred wounded spirit. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice surprisingly steady. "Thank you." Maxwell stood there, water beginning to seep into his Italian leather shoes despite the umbrella's protection. In boardrooms across the country, people trembled when he entered. Yet this woman in her ruined wedding dress showed no intimidation at all. "You're clearly not fine," he stated matter-of-factly. "And this storm isn't letting up. I can take you wherever you need to go." She almost smiled then, a brief, bitter quirk of her lips. "That's just it. I have nowhere I need to go." Thunder rolled overhead, punctuating her words with cosmic timing. Maxwell felt something stir within him, a protective instinct he thought had died with Catherine. "Then perhaps," he said quietly, "you'd like to go somewhere dry until you figure it out." For a long moment she studied him, weighing invisible options. Maxwell Reed, who never waited for anyone, found himself holding his breath. Finally, she stood, gathering what remained of her dignity along with the sodden train of her dress. "Why not?" she said, stepping toward him and the waiting Bentley. After all, today couldn't possibly get any worse. Little did either of them know how profoundly wrong she was about that. The interior of Maxwell's Bentley smelled of expensive leather and subtle cologne. Olivia Warren sat stiffly, trying not to drip on the immaculate upholstery, a futile effort given her soaked wedding dress. "Do you have a name?" Maxwell asked, breaking the silence as he navigated through the worsening storm. "Olivia," she replied, then after a pause, "Olivia Warren." She studied him from the corner of her eye. Expensive suit, confident posture, the casual way he handled a vehicle worth more than she'd make in a decade of teaching. He was handsome in that unapproachable way of men accustomed to power, sharp jawline, calculating eyes, not a hair out of place despite the weather. "Maxwell Reed," he offered without being asked. "Where was the wedding?" Olivia flinched. "St. Patrick's Cathedral." "Prestigious," Maxwell commented, his tone neutral. "It belonged to his family, not mine," she said, a bitter edge creeping into her voice. "Thomas Harrington. His family owns half the real estate on the Upper East Side." Maxwell nodded, immediately placing the name. "And you left?" "He left," Olivia corrected, staring out at the rain-blurred city. "Right before the vows. Said I would never fit into his world." She laughed, a hollow sound. 5 years together and I find out he's a coward on our wedding day." The memory of Thomas's whispered words still burned. "You're beautiful, Olivia, but let's be realistic. You'll never truly belong." "Where should I take you?" Maxwell asked, interrupting her thoughts. Olivia realized she had nowhere to go. Her apartment had been packed up, ready for the move into Thomas's penthouse. Her bridesmaid's apartment would be filled with wedding guests by now, everyone dissecting her humiliation over champagne. "I don't know," she admitted. Maxwell observed her reflection in the rearview mirror. She wasn't crying or hysterical, just sitting with quiet resignation. He respected that. "I have a spare room," he said before he could reconsider. "You can collect yourself, make calls, figure out your next step." Olivia's eyes narrowed. "And what would that cost me?" Maxwell's jaw tightened. "Nothing. Contrary to what today has taught you, not everyone has ulterior motives." As the Bentley pulled into the private garage beneath a towering luxury building, Olivia felt a flutter of uncertainty. She was following a stranger home, a powerful, wealthy stranger, while emotionally vulnerable and wearing a wedding dress. "I'm a teacher," she said suddenly. "Elementary school, 3rd grade." Maxwell glanced at her, understanding the message. "I'm a real person. I'll be missed if I disappear. My housekeeper lives in Mrs. Winters. She's 70 and terrifying. You'll be perfectly safe." The elevator opened directly into his penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Manhattan spread out below, the storm transforming the city into a watercolor painting of grays and blurred lights. "Welcome to my home," Maxwell said formally, as if the words were rarely spoken. Olivia stepped inside, trailing water and lost dreams across his pristine marble floor. Something about the sterile perfection of the space told her she wasn't the only one carrying emptiness inside. Mrs. Winters materialized in the foyer like a stern apparition, her silver hair pulled into a tight bun, her expression shifting from surprise to suspicion as she took in Olivia's bedraggled form. "Mr. Reed," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "I wasn't aware we were expecting a guest." "Neither was I," Maxwell replied. "Mrs. Winters, this is Miss Warren. She'll be staying in the East guest room tonight." The housekeeper's thin lips pressed together, but she nodded. "I'll prepare it immediately. And perhaps some dry clothes?" "From Catherine's closet," Maxwell said, the name falling heavily between them. "The casual items in the back." Mrs. Winters departed without another word, leaving Olivia standing awkwardly on the imported marble, still dripping. "Catherine was your wife?" Olivia asked softly. Maxwell's face closed like a vault. "Yes. She passed away 5 years ago." The penthouse suddenly made sense to Olivia, its perfect, untouched quality, like a museum dedicated to a life interrupted. She recognized grief when she saw it, It was an entirely different beast from her own fresh heartbreak. "I'm sorry," she said simply. Maxwell nodded once, accepting her words without elaboration. "The bathroom is through there," he indicated with a gesture. "Mrs. Winters will bring clothes shortly." 30 minutes later, Olivia emerged wearing designer jeans that hung slightly loose on her frame and a cashmere sweater so soft it felt like a whisper against her skin. Her wedding dress lay in a damp heap on the bathroom floor, a problem for tomorrow's Olivia. She found Maxwell in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, tie discarded, pouring 2 glasses of red wine. "I don't cook," he said by way of explanation, but Mrs. Winters left dinner in the warming drawer before she retired to her quarters. "Does she live here full-time?" Olivia asked, accepting the wine. "She has an apartment downstairs. Catherine hired her years ago." His voice softened slightly at the mention of his wife. Over a simple but exquisite meal of roast chicken and vegetables, they observed each other cautiously. The dining room featured a glass table that seemed to float above the cityscape, the storm providing dramatic background lighting to their unusual dinner. "Why did you stop for me?" Olivia finally asked. Maxwell considered her question, swirling wine in his glass. "I don't know," he admitted, the honesty surprising them both. "It seemed important." Olivia nodded, understanding there was more to his answer than he was sharing. She noticed photographs on a distant shelf, a beautiful blonde woman with Maxwell both smiling, his face years younger and infinitely more open. "You said I could make calls," Olivia said, "but I think I'd rather not talk to anyone tonight." "Understandable," Maxwell replied. "The world will still be there tomorrow with all its questions and expectations." Something in his words resonated with her deeply. They finished their meal in comfortable silence, 2 strangers connected by nothing more than circumstance and private pain. Later, lying in a guest bed more luxurious than any she'd ever slept in, Olivia stared at the ceiling and wondered what strange twist of fate had brought her here. From almost bride to runaway to the temporary guest of a man who seemed as broken as she felt, just in a different way. Tomorrow would require decisions, but tonight, in this suspended moment between what was and what would be, she allowed herself to simply breathe. Morning light filtered through automated blinds, waking Olivia. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Not in her apartment, not in Thomas's penthouse, but in a stranger's guest room. She dressed quickly in yesterday's borrowed clothes and made the bed with hospital corners, a habit from childhood. Her ruined wedding dress hung in the bathroom, now dry but hopelessly wrinkled. Like her plans, she thought wryly. Olivia found the kitchen empty but not abandoned. Coffee brewed in an expensive machine, a place setting arranged at the counter, and a handwritten note beside a croissant. "Had to leave early. Mrs. Winters has the day off. Stay as long as you need. Mr." The formality of his initials made her smile. Maxwell Reed was clearly a man accustomed to signing documents, not leaving breakfast notes. After eating, Olivia wandered through the penthouse, struck by its contradiction. Exquisite taste evident in every piece of furniture, yet a coldness permeated the space. It felt like a showroom, perfect but unlived in. She found herself in his study, where books lay scattered across surfaces. Without thinking, she began organizing them, her teacher's instincts taking over. The volumes revealed a curious mind: economic, theory beside poetry collections, architectural journals alongside historical biographies. By midday, she'd rearranged his bookshelves completely, creating a system both functional and aesthetically pleasing. She was placing the final book when the elevator doors opened. Maxwell stopped short seeing her there. "You're still here." "I was just leaving," Olivia said quickly. She gestured to the reorganized shelves, suddenly embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have touched your things." He approached slowly, examining her work. "You've created categories. Fiction, nonfiction, then by subject," she explained. "The bottom shelves are oversized books. They fit better there physically and visually." To her surprise, Maxwell nodded approvingly. "It makes sense. Why did you do this?" Olivia shrugged. "Habit, I guess." I'm a teacher. Creating order is second nature. You teach children? Third grade? 8-year-olds? Maxwell tried to imagine. This woman, who had calmly rearranged his library after being left at the altar, managing 20 energetic children. That requires patience. Different from your world, I imagine, she said. Very. His gaze lingered on her face. Why did you return to the city so early? Most executives don't start their day until 9. Board meeting in Tokyo. The time difference, and awkward silence fell. They were from universes that rarely intersected. I should go, Olivia said finally. Where? Maxwell asked. His directness might have seemed rude, but she found it refreshing after Thomas's polished evasiveness. I don't know yet, she admitted. My apartment lease ended last week. Everything's in storage except what I packed for the honeymoon. Maxwell considered this information with the same attention he might give market projections. The guest room is available until you sort things out. Olivia studied him, trying to understand his motivation. Why would you help me? Because I can, he said simply. And because... He glanced around at his perfect empty home. This place could use some life in it. Something passed between them then. Not attraction, but recognition. Two people, adrift in different ways, offering each other a temporary harbor. 1 week, Olivia decided, just until I find somewhere permanent. Maxwell nodded once the matter settled with the same efficiency with which he presumably closed multi-million-dollar deals. Neither suspected how completely that week would change both their lives. Mrs. Winters returned the next day, her disapproving gaze following Olivia as she moved through the penthouse. The housekeeper maintained perfect professionalism, but her protective instincts toward Maxwell were evident in every crisp movement. Mrs. Winters, Olivia said, approaching her as she dusted a collection of crystal awards. I want you to know, I'm not taking advantage of Mr. Reed's kindness. I'll be gone within the week. The older woman paused, studying Olivia with sharp eyes. Mr. Reed doesn't bring people home, not since Mrs. Reed passed. Olivia absorbed this information carefully. It was just the rain and unfortunate timing. Perhaps, Mrs. Winters said, resuming her dusting. Or perhaps not. That evening, Maxwell arrived with an unexpected guest, a striking woman in her early 40s whose resemblance to him was unmistakable. Eleanor, Maxwell said, this is Olivia. Warren, she's staying here temporarily. Is she now? Eleanor's perfectly arched eyebrow conveyed volumes. She extended a manicured hand. Eleanor Reed Blackwood, Maxwell's sister and the only person who tells him the truth. It's nice to meet you, Olivia said, suddenly conscious of her borrowed clothes and bare feet. Over dinner, Eleanor interrogated Olivia with the precision of a prosecutor, while Maxwell watched silently. A teacher, Eleanor remarked when Olivia explained her profession. How fulfilling, though I imagine the salary leaves something to be desired. The satisfaction doesn't, Olivia replied without hesitation. Eleanor's lips twitched with something like respect. And now you're staying in my brother's penthouse. Quite a change of scenery. Eleanor, Maxwell warned. What? I'm simply making conversation with your guest. Olivia met Eleanor's gaze directly. I understand your concern. A strange woman in your brother's home after a 5-year solitude. But I'm not here for any reason except kindness offered when I needed it. The atmosphere shifted subtly. Eleanor sat back, reassessing Olivia. Well, she said finally, at least you're direct. After Eleanor left, Maxwell poured 2 glasses of scotch on the terrace overlooking the glittering city. I apologize for my sister, he said. Don't, Olivia replied. She loves you. Maxwell studied her over his glass. Tomorrow's your last day, according to your timeline. Olivia nodded, watching lights blink across Manhattan. I've found a sublet in Brooklyn. Nothing fancy, but affordable until the school year starts again. I have a proposition, Maxwell said suddenly. This place needs life. It's been a hotel room for 5 years. What are you suggesting? Stay. Not as a guest. but as a consultant. Transform this penthouse into something habitable. You have an eye for it. I saw what you did with the study. Olivia blinked, surprised. I'm a teacher, not an interior designer. You understand what makes a space feel like home, he countered. I'll pay you, of course. For the first time since the wedding disaster, Olivia felt a spark of something besides numbness, curiosity, purpose, possibility. Why me? She asked. Maxwell's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Because you see things differently than I do, and right now, that's exactly what I need. Olivia's consultancy began with small changes. She moved furniture to create conversation areas rather than formal arrangements. She added throw pillows in rich emerald and sapphire tones to soften the penthouse's monochromatic palette. Each modification was calculated, significant enough to make a difference but subtle enough not to overwhelm Maxwell. The lighting is all wrong, she told him one evening as he returned from work. Everything's overhead and harsh, we need lamps, warmth at eye level. Maxwell found himself increasingly fascinated by her certainty. How do you know these things? I create classroom environments all day, she explained, sketching layout ideas. Children need spaces that feel secure but stimulating. Adults aren't. So different. They shop together on a Sunday, a surreal experience for both. While Maxwell normally delegated such tasks, he found himself drawn into Olivia's enthusiasm as she examined textures and compared colors in a home goods store where nothing cost more than his watch. This isn't what I expected, he admitted, carrying bags to the car. What did you expect? Designer showrooms, 5-figure price tags. Olivia laughed. That's decorating for appearances. We're creating a home. The distinction struck him deeply. Mrs. Winters observed their evolving dynamic with cautious interest. She'd initially assumed Olivia was another social climber, but the teacher showed no interest in Maxwell's wealth, only in transforming sterile spaces into something lived in. You've moved Mrs. Reed's photographs. Mrs. Winters noted one afternoon, her tone carefully neutral. Not away, Olivia clarified. Just into better light. They deserve to be seen properly. The housekeeper studied her thoughtfully before nodding. Maxwell began arriving home earlier, curious about each day's changes. One night, returning past midnight from a business dinner, he found Olivia asleep on the sofa, design magazines spread across the coffee table. Instead of waking her, he settled in a nearby chair with his laptop, working as she slept. The steady rhythm of her breathing created an unexpected soundtrack to his financial projections. When she stirred an hour later, disoriented, he simply handed her a glass of water. You should have woken me, she murmured. You seemed peaceful, he replied. It's a rare commodity. During her third week, long past her original departure date, Maxwell discovered Olivia in Catherine's closet, respectfully sorting through untouched clothes. I should have asked, she said, seeing his expression. No, he said after a pause. It's time. Catherine would hate knowing her things were preserved like museum pieces. That night, they shared a bottle of wine on the terrace while discussing which clothes to donate. Tell me about her, Olivia said gently. Maxwell's face softened, in a way she'd never seen. She was brilliant, analytical but kind. She could dismantle your argument while making you feel understood. You must miss her terribly. Every day, he acknowledged, but differently now. Neither mentioned how Olivia had extended her stay indefinitely, or how Maxwell's penthouse was slowly becoming a place where both felt increasingly at home. You need something to wear, Maxwell stated, eyeing Olivia across the breakfast table. I have clothes, she replied, gesturing to her borrowed outfit. The Blackwood Foundation Gala is tonight. My attendance is mandatory and I... He hesitated, seeming almost uncertain. I'd like you to accompany me. Olivia nearly choked on her coffee. To a corporate gala? With your business associates and investors? Is that so difficult to imagine? Yes, she said honestly. I don't belong in that world. Something flickered across Maxwell's face. Recognition, perhaps. That's precisely why I want you there. Hours, Later, Olivia stood before a mirror in a boutique where everything lacked price tags, a sure sign nothing was affordable. The saleswoman had brought a selection of gowns after a brief, assessing look at Olivia's figure. This one, the saleswoman decided, holding up a midnight blue dress with a subtle shimmer. Classic enough for corporate, but not boring. Stepping into the gala on Maxwell's arm, Olivia felt like an imposter. The Plaza Hotel ballroom glittered with wealth and power. CEOs, politicians, old money families. Eleanor approached immediately, surprise evident beneath her polished smile. Olivia. What an unexpected pleasure. Your brother needed a +1, Olivia replied lightly. Did he now? Eleanor's gaze shifted to Maxwell, who was unusually tense. As Maxwell was pulled into conversations about market projections and acquisition targets, Olivia observed his transformation. The man who had started leaving his tie loosened at home, became sharp-edged and coolly analytical. His words, precisely chosen, commanded attention. She glimpsed what made him feared in boardrooms, a brilliant strategic mind coupled with unwavering focus. Maxwell Reed doesn't bring dates to these functions, said a cultured voice beside her. Olivia turned to find an elegant older man watching her with calculated interest. Lawrence Hemsworth, he introduced himself. I knew Catherine's father well. Olivia. Warren. A teacher, I understand. Quite a departure from Catherine's social circle. Something in his tone made Olivia wary. I'm not trying to replace Catherine. Lawrence's smile didn't reach his eyes. Intentions are such complex things, aren't they? Before she could respond, Maxwell appeared at her side, his hand settling protectively at the small of her back. Lawrence, he acknowledged coldly. Maxwell, I was just getting acquainted with your companion. Olivia is much more than that, Maxwell replied, his tone making it clear the conversation was over. As Lawrence departed, Olivia felt the curious gazes of nearby guests. They're all wondering what I'm doing here, she murmured. Let them wonder, Maxwell said, guiding her toward the dance floor. I stopped caring about their opinions long ago. Dancing with Maxwell, Olivia felt the rigid control in his frame. He moved perfectly, of course, but there was nothing relaxed in his posture. You're different here, she observed. This is business, he replied simply. Later, as they ascended in his private elevator, Maxwell's shoulders finally relaxed. He loosened his tie, sighing. Thank you for coming tonight, he said quietly. I felt out of place, Olivia admitted. You were the only genuine person in the room. Maxwell replied, his fingers briefly brushing hers as the elevator doors opened to his, penthouse. My mother's in the hospital. Maxwell looked up from his laptop to find Olivia standing in his home office doorway, phone clutched in her hand, face pale. Is it serious? He asked, immediately setting aside his work. Pneumonia. The neighbor who called says it's concerning, but not critical. I need to go see her. Olivia's voice trembled slightly, the first real vulnerability Maxwell had witnessed since finding her at the bus stop. Where is she? Mapleton. It's a small town about 2 hours north. Maxwell closed his laptop decisively. I'll drive you. You don't have to. I know, he interrupted. I want to. The drive north revealed a side of Maxwell that Olivia hadn't seen before, a focused calm that made her racing thoughts settle. His Bentley seemed out of place as they left the city behind, trading skyscrapers for increasingly rural landscapes. Tell me about your mother, Maxwell said as they drove through small towns with American flags and family-owned storefronts. Janet Warren. She raised me alone after my father left when I was 4, Olivia explained. She worked as a seamstress, still does when her arthritis allows. She made my wedding dress. Maxwell glanced at her, understanding washing over his face. That's why you kept it, despite everything. Olivia nodded, touched by his perception. Your parents? My father owned a hardware store. Lost it when a big chain moved in. He died, still believing he'd failed us, Maxwell said, his voice matter-of-fact but tinged with old pain. My mother worked double shifts as a nurse to put me through college. That explains a lot about you, Olivia observed. Maxwell raised an eyebrow. What does it explain? Why you work so hard? Why success matters so much? He considered this. I promised myself I'd never be vulnerable to forces beyond my control again. And yet, here you are, driving a woman you barely know to visit her sick mother. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Perhaps I'm getting soft in my old age. The Warren home was a modest two-bedroom with a small but well-tended garden. Maxwell felt oddly nervous as they approached the front door, a sentiment he'd never experienced in shareholder meetings or billion-dollar negotiations. Olivia's mother, despite her illness, possessed the same quiet dignity as her daughter. Propped up in her bed with an oxygen tube in her nose, Janet Warren's assessing gaze took in Maxwell's expensive clothes and cautious posture. "So you're the man who rescued my daughter," she said without preamble. "Mom," Olivia chided gently. "I merely offered transportation and temporary housing," Maxwell replied. Janet's eyes twinkled. "Is that what the kids call it these days?" To Olivia's surprise, Maxwell laughed, a genuine sound she'd rarely heard from him. "I like your mother," he told her. They stayed for dinner, Maxwell insisting on ordering food from the best restaurant in town. As they ate around Janet's bed, Olivia noticed how Maxwell adapted to the humble surroundings with unexpected grace. He asked Janet about her sewing, showing genuine interest in her craft. "You should see what your daughter has done with my apartment," he told Janet. "She has your eye for detail." Later, as Olivia helped her mother with medication, Janet whispered, "He watches you when you're not looking." "It's not like that," Olivia insisted. Janet patted her hand. "Maybe not yet." On the drive back to Manhattan, a comfortable silence filled the car. The city skyline emerged on the horizon, glittering with possibility. "Thank you," Olivia said quietly. "For today." Maxwell kept his eyes on the road, but his hand briefly covered hers. "Your mother is remarkable. I see where you get your strength." In that moment something shifted between them, a recognition that they'd moved beyond landlord and tenant, beyond even friendship, into something neither was quite ready to name. Sleep eluded Maxwell that night. The penthouse, once a fortress of solitude, now held echoes of Olivia's presence. A book left open, a teacup forgotten on the windowsill, the subtle scent of her shampoo lingering in the hallway. He found himself in the kitchen at 3 a.m., making tea, a habit he'd acquired from watching her. The sound of soft footsteps made him turn. "Couldn't sleep either?" Olivia asked, wrapped in a borrowed robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. "Apparently not," Maxwell replied, offering a cup. They moved to the living room, now transformed with comfortable seating and warm lighting. Rain pattered against the windows, echoing the night they'd met. "Why did you really ask me to stay?" Olivia asked suddenly, curling her legs beneath her on the sofa. Maxwell considered deflecting but found himself answering honestly. "After Catherine died, I built walls around everything, my home, my life, my emotions. It was efficient, but lonely," she observed. "I told myself loneliness was irrelevant compared to control." Olivia studied his face in the dim light. "And now?" "Now I find myself questioning that assumption." His voice grew quieter. "What about you? Why did you stay?" "Because I wasn't ready to face what comes next," she admitted. "Thomas didn't just reject me. He rejected the future I'd planned for years." "Do you still love him?" Olivia considered this. "I love who I thought he was, but that person never existed." She sighed. "I've spent my whole life trying to fit other people's expectations. My mother's dream of seeing me marry well, Thomas's vision of a wife he could shape into his world. And what do you want?" "To stop disappearing," she whispered. "Every relationship I lose a little more of myself trying to become what someone else needs." Maxwell set down his cup. "I've done the opposite, refused to bend for anyone since Catherine. The company became everything, a monument to control." "We're quite the pair," Olivia said with a sad smile. "You've built walls so high no one can get in. I've made myself so malleable I hardly know what shape I'm supposed to be." Something shifted in Maxwell's expression. a softening around the eyes that transformed his entire face. I've watched you these past weeks. You're strongest when you're simply yourself, rearranging my bookshelves, challenging my sister, charming my difficult housekeeper. That terrifies me, Olivia confessed. Being just me. It terrifies me too, Maxwell admitted. Seeing my carefully constructed world changing, finding myself, caring. The word hung between them, laden with unspoken meaning. Neither reached to bridge the final gap, both too aware of their respective wounds. We should try to sleep, Olivia finally said, rising from the sofa. Maxwell nodded, but caught her hand as she passed. Thank you, he said simply, for making this place feel like more than a showroom. Thank you, she replied, for giving me space to remember who I am. Their fingertips lingered for a moment longer than necessary before separating, each returning to their solitary rooms, carrying the weight of truths finally spoken aloud. The fragile peace Maxwell and Olivia had constructed shattered one morning, with the arrival of unexpected visitors. Olivia was rearranging flowers in the living room when the elevator doors opened. The man who stepped out was painfully familiar. Thomas Harrington, impeccably dressed as always, his handsome face a mask of practiced contrition. Olivia, he said, as if finding her in a billionaire's penthouse was perfectly normal. You're a difficult woman to track down. She froze, vase clutched in her hands. How did you find me? Does it matter? I've been looking everywhere. He stepped closer, his cologne triggering unwanted memories. We need to talk. We have nothing to discuss, Olivia replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Thomas's expression hardened slightly. Don't be childish. What happened at the wedding was regrettable, but you can't seriously be hiding out here as some sort of revenge. Before Olivia could respond, the elevator opened again. This time a striking blonde woman emerged, her designer outfit screaming old money and European sophistication. Maxwell, darling, your secretary told me. The woman stopped short, taking in the scene. Oh, you have guests. Vanessa, Maxwell said, appearing from his office, tension evident in his shoulders. This is unexpected. Clearly, she replied, her gaze shifting between Olivia and Thomas with calculated assessment. I returned from Paris yesterday. Eleanor mentioned you'd been distracted lately. Now I see why. The room crackled with unspoken history and fresh tension. Olivia realized this woman, Catherine's sister, saw her as an intruder, perhaps even a replacement. I should give you privacy, Olivia said, moving toward her room. Don't leave on my account, Vanessa said with brittle politeness. I'm simply checking on my brother-in-law. Family obligation, you understand. Thomas seized the moment of distraction. Olivia, just give me 5 minutes. I made a terrible mistake. Maxwell's expression hardened as he positioned himself subtly between Thomas and Olivia. I believe Miss Warren made her position clear. Thomas assessed Maxwell with newfound wariness. I wasn't aware Olivia had found a protector. Is that what you think I need? Olivia asked quietly. Protection from you? Something in her tone made Thomas step back. This wasn't the accommodating woman he'd known, the one who had spent years molding herself to fit his expectations. Vanessa watched the exchange with shrewd eyes. Maxwell, perhaps we should discuss this privately. I have concerns about certain appearances. The atmosphere in the penthouse had transformed completely. The warm, evolving space Olivia had created now felt like contested territory, with her presence suddenly questionable. Later, after both unwelcome visitors had departed, with promises to return, Olivia stood on the terrace, watching the city lights emerge at dusk. They won't give up easily, Maxwell said, joining her. Thomas, Vanessa, they're accustomed to getting their way. Like someone else I know, Olivia replied with a sad smile. Maxwell didn't deny it. What will you do? The question hung between them, carrying more weight than its simple words suggested. What started as temporary shelter had become something neither had expected. But with the past suddenly back in their lives, the precarious balance they'd created seemed suddenly at risk. "I don't know," Olivia admitted. "For the first time in years, I was beginning to feel like myself again. Now I'm not sure who that is anymore." The headline glared from Olivia's phone screen. Blackwood CEO's mystery woman, gold digger or genuine love. Below it was a candid photo of her and Maxwell leaving a restaurant, his hand protectively on her. Beck. The article, published by Lawrence Hemsworth's media company, painted a damning picture, suggesting Olivia had a history of pursuing wealthy men, including Thomas Harrington, before upgrading to Maxwell Reed. "Have you seen this?" Eleanor demanded, striding into the penthouse unannounced, waving her own phone. "Yes," Maxwell replied tensely. He'd been on conference calls since dawn, damage control in full swing. Olivia sat silently on the sofa, still processing how her life had become tabloid fodder. The article contained just enough truth to make its lies believable. Her relationship with Thomas, her presence in Maxwell's home, even details about her modest background. "The Shimura deal is wavering," Eleanor said, lowering her voice. "Their board has concerns about stability." Maxwell's jaw tightened. The Shimura acquisition had been in negotiations for months, a cornerstone of Blackwood's Asian expansion. "This is ridiculous," he said. "My personal life has no bearing on business decisions." "You know that's not true," Eleanor replied. "Perception is everything." Later, alone with Maxwell, Olivia finally spoke. "I should leave." "That's exactly what Lawrence wants," Maxwell said, pacing the terrace. "He's trying to manipulate me through you." "But why? What does he gain?" "Catherine's father chose me to run their family business instead of him. He's never forgiven that perceived slight." Maxwell sighed, running a hand through his usually perfect hair. "Now he's using you to get to me." Olivia stood, crossing to the railing. The city stretched below, indifferent to their personal drama. "Regardless of his motives, I'm damaging your company's reputation. I don't care about that." "Yes, you do," she said gently. "Your company is your life's work. I won't be responsible for undermining it." Maxwell moved closer, his expression softening. "When did you start to matter more than business deals?" The question hung between them, neither quite ready to answer it directly. That evening, Maxwell attended an emergency board meeting while Olivia packed her few belongings. She wrote a letter, old-fashioned perhaps, but it felt right. Words of gratitude, of understanding, of something deeper left unspoken. When Maxwell returned, the penthouse was quiet. Mrs. Winters met him in the foyer, her normally impassive face showing concern. "She's gone, sir," the housekeeper said, handing him the sealed envelope. "She asked me to give you this." Maxwell stood in the living room that Olivia had transformed, letter in hand, feeling the weight of her absence in every corner she had brightened. The space was beautiful now, warm and inviting, and completely empty without her. The penthouse phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Eleanor's voice was triumphant. "Shimura is back on board," she announced. "They were impressed by your decisive handling of personal distractions." Maxwell looked at the letter still unopened in his hand. "Congratulations," he said hollowly. "We got exactly what we wanted." The Blackwood-Shimura merger made headlines across financial markets. Industry analysts called it Maxwell Reed's most brilliant move yet, a perfect strategic acquisition that would redefine the company's global footprint. Maxwell read the praise with detached indifference. His corner office, 60 floors above Manhattan, felt more like a prison than ever. He signed the final documents mechanically, nodding as board members and executives offered congratulations. "You should be celebrating," Eleanor said, lingering, after the others had departed. "This is what you've worked for." Maxwell stared out at the city. "Is it?" His sister studied him with growing concern. In the 3 weeks since Olivia's departure, he'd become more withdrawn than ever. Arriving first, leaving last, working with a cold intensity that even his workaholic standards hadn't previously reached. Have you heard from her? Eleanor finally asked. No. Maxwell's tone discouraged further questions, but the truth was more complicated. He'd read Olivia's letter countless times, memorizing every word of her graceful exit. He'd traced the address she'd included, her mother's house in Mapleton. He'd even driven there once, only to sit in his car at the end of the street, unable to approach. At home, the penthouse remained exactly as Olivia had transformed it, warm, inviting, and achingly empty. Mrs. Winters maintained it perfectly, but something vital had departed with Olivia. "Mr. Reed," Mrs. Winters said one evening as she prepared to leave. "May I speak freely?" Maxwell looked up from untouched dinner. "Of course. I've served this household for nearly a decade. I've watched you build an empire while living in a mausoleum." The older woman's voice gentled. "Miss Warren brought life back into these rooms and, if I may say so, into you as well." "She left because of me," Maxwell replied. "My world damaged her." "Perhaps," Mrs. Winters acknowledged. "Or perhaps she left to protect you, which is quite different." The observation lingered after she departed. Maxwell wandered through the penthouse, touching the small changes Olivia had made. Books arranged by color, photographs repositioned. To catch the light, curtains left partially open to frame the city view. A violent rainstorm broke over Manhattan that night, echoing the one when he'd found her. Maxwell stood at the window, watching lightning illuminate the skyline, making a decision that felt simultaneously impulsive and long overdue. Without bothering with an umbrella, he rode the elevator down and walked through the downpour to the bus stop where he'd first seen Olivia. The rain soaked through his expensive suit as he sat on the bench, letting himself feel everything he'd been suppressing. Grief for Catherine, no longer sharp, but mellowed into acceptance. Loneliness self-imposed for 5 careful years. And something new. An aching for a particular voice, a specific presence that had nothing to do with business empires or strategic acquisitions. A passing taxi driver slowed, calling out, "Hey buddy, you need a ride?" Maxwell shook his head, rainwater streaming down his face, indistinguishable from what might have been tears. Meanwhile, in a small elementary school classroom, Olivia arranged colorful artwork on bulletin boards. She had accepted a summer school position, immersing herself in work to avoid thinking about the penthouse and the man she'd left behind. When a sleek black car pulled up outside the school, her heart jumped traitorously. But it was Thomas who emerged, clutching a bouquet and wearing his most persuasive smile. "One conversation," he called through the classroom window. "That's all I'm asking." Olivia sighed, knowing this confrontation was inevitable. What she couldn't know was that her choice in the coming minutes would alter not just her future, but Maxwell's as well. Thomas stood before Olivia, his practiced charm on full display. In the schoolyard, curious children watched the scene unfold, their teacher and the handsome man with flowers. "You look well," Thomas said, offering the bouquet. Olivia didn't take it. "What do you want, Thomas?" "A second chance." His voice softened to the tone that had once made her heart race. "I made the worst mistake of my life walking away from you. My family, their expectations. I let them cloud my judgment. It's been months," Olivia replied. "I've moved on." "To Maxwell Reed?" Thomas's expression hardened slightly. "Is that what this is about? Using him to make me jealous?" The accusation stung precisely because it questioned what Olivia had asked herself repeatedly. Had she simply replaced one man's approval with another's? "Maxwell has nothing to do with this," she said firmly. "This is about me finally understanding my own worth." Thomas stepped closer. "I'm prepared to make it official. Right now. No more hesitation." He reached into his pocket and, to Olivia's shock, produced a ring box. Behind him, several students gasped, "Thomas, don't marry me, Olivia. Today, tomorrow, whenever you're ready." He opened the box, revealing a diamond significantly larger than the one he'd given her before. "I'll announce our engagement to everyone. My family can accept it or not, I don't care anymore." The grand gesture hung between them, drawing attention from passing parents. Olivia felt the weight of public expectation, the same pressure that had once made her mold herself to fit Thomas's world. A few months ago, this would have been everything I wanted, she said quietly. Thomas smiled, sensing victory. It still can be. No, Olivia replied with sudden clarity. It can't, because I'm not the same person who waited at that altar. Thomas's smile faltered. Is this about Reed? Has he promised you something better? This has nothing to do with Maxwell, Olivia said, though her heart contradicted her words. This is about me finally understanding what I deserve. Thomas's charm slipped, revealing the calculation beneath. You're making a mistake. Whatever Reed has offered won't last. Men like him don't marry women like you. The cruel echo of his wedding day rejection might once have devastated her. Now Olivia simply felt pity for him. Goodbye, Thomas, she said firmly, turning back toward her classroom. Olivia, wait! Thomas called after her, but his voice was drowned out by the arrival of another car. Maxwell stepped out, disheveled in a way Olivia had never seen, his suit rumpled, hair windblown, eyes searching until they found her. He stopped short at the sight of Thomas with the ring box still in hand. The three stood frozen in tableau, past, present, and possible future, converging in a schoolyard on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Mr. Reed? One of Olivia's students whispered, loudly. The man from the magazine? Maxwell smiled slightly at the child, then looked back at Olivia, his expression asking a silent question. The tension in the schoolyard was palpable. Thomas looked between Olivia and Maxwell, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding to calculation. So this is how it is, he said quietly. I should have known. Maxwell remained silent, keeping his distance. Unlike Thomas's grand gesture, he made no move to insert himself between Olivia and her past. Instead, his eyes conveyed a simple message. Whatever you choose, I'll respect it. Thomas closed the ring box with a decisive snap. You've changed, Olivia. Yes, she agreed. I have. With a final look of wounded pride, Thomas returned to his car and drove away. The spectating children, sensing the drama had concluded, gradually dispersed to the playground. Olivia approached Maxwell, taking in his disheveled appearance. You look terrible. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I've been told honesty is the foundation of any relationship. Is that what we have? A relationship? Maxwell's expression grew serious. I don't know, but I'd like to find out. They walked to a nearby park, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the grass. For several minutes neither spoke, content to simply exist in each other's presence again. I sold the penthouse, Maxwell finally said. Olivia stopped walking. What? Why? It wasn't home, not even after all your improvements. He shrugged. It was a monument to who I thought I needed to be after Catherine died. Where will you live? I'm looking at a place in Brooklyn, brownstone, needs work. Maxwell hesitated. I was hoping you might help with that, as a consultant, or whatever role you might consider. Olivia studied him carefully. And Blackwood? The Shimura deal? Successful. Stock prices at an all-time high. Maxwell's tone suggested these facts no longer held the significance they once had. I've restructured the company leadership, delegated more responsibility. Eleanor must have been thrilled about that, Olivia remarked with a small smile. She thinks I'm having a midlife crisis. Maybe I am. Maxwell turned to face her directly. I've spent 5 years building walls, Olivia. Perfect, impenetrable walls around everything that mattered. Then you walked into my life, or rather, sat at that bus stop. And suddenly the walls seemed pointless. A group of children ran past them, laughing and chasing a frisbee. Olivia watched them, reminded of her students. I've been doing some rebuilding of my own. I can see that, Maxwell said. You look centered. I'm seeing a therapist, she admitted, working through why I spent so many years trying to be what Thomas wanted instead of figuring out who I really am. Maxwell nodded. I've started therapy, too, trying to understand why I turned my grief into a fortress. They found a bench overlooking a small pond. The city surrounded them, but this pocket of green offered a moment of tranquility. I'm not ready to jump into another relationship, Olivia said honestly. I need to know who I am outside of anyone's expectations, even yours. I understand, Maxwell replied. I have my own work to do. But, Olivia continued, I would like to see this brownstone. As a consultant, of course. Of course, Maxwell agreed, the corners of his eyes crinkling slightly. Strictly professional. The following weekend, Maxwell picked Olivia up in his Bentley, the one extravagance he'd kept. They drove to a tree-lined Brooklyn street where a 4-story brownstone stood among similar historic buildings. It's beautiful, Olivia said as they climbed the steps to the front door. Wait until you see the inside, Maxwell warned, unlocking the door. It needs significant work. The interior revealed high ceilings, ornate moldings, and hardwood floors, hidden beneath years of neglect. Dust motes danced in sunlight streaming through dirty windows. The kitchen featured ancient appliances, and several walls showed water damage. Olivia walked through each room slowly, envisioning possibilities. Why this place? You could afford something perfect. Perfect isn't what I want anymore, Maxwell replied, running his hand along a banister. I want something with history, with character, something that requires effort and patience. Their eyes met, both aware they weren't just discussing real estate. It has good bones, Olivia decided, opening French doors that led to a small, overgrown garden. It could be wonderful. With the right help, Maxwell added. As they stood in the empty house full of potential, neither made promises or declarations. Instead, they simply agreed that rebuilding, whether homes or lives, was best done thoughtfully, patiently, and with care. 1 year later, autumn leaves swirled around the brownstone's freshly painted steps. Inside, the transformation was complete. Not into a showplace of wealth, but into something far more valuable, a home. The ornate moldings had been restored, hardwood floors refinished to a warm glow. The kitchen now featured a blend of modern appliances and vintage charm. Throughout the house, colors were rich but welcoming, furniture arranged for conversation rather than display. In the garden, which had blossomed under Olivia's care, a small gathering celebrated the completion of the renovation. Janet Warren, fully recovered from her illness, chatted comfortably with Mrs. Winters, who had insisted on catering the event despite no longer being in Maxwell's employ. Eleanor, whose initial skepticism had gradually softened, was deep in conversation with the principal of Olivia's school about the educational foundation Maxwell had established. The Blackwood Foundation for Educational Equity now funded programs in underserved communities across the city. I hardly recognize my brother anymore, Eleanor commented as Maxwell approached with drinks. Running a successful company and leaving the office by 5 most days? Who are you? Maxwell smiled, the expression now coming naturally to him. Someone who finally understood what mattered. Across the garden, Olivia arranged flowers at a small table, her movements confident and purposeful. She had completed her master's degree and opened a pilot program for arts-integrated learning in her school district, partially supported by Maxwell's foundation, but operating independently under her leadership. You two still maintaining separate residences? Eleanor asked, following his gaze. For now, Maxwell replied. We're taking our time. And they had. Over the past year, they'd moved carefully, deliberately, not rushing to fill the emptiness in each other's lives, but building something sustainable between them. Maxwell spent weekdays at a modest apartment near his office, weekends at the brownstone. Olivia maintained her small place near her school, but spent increasingly more time in Brooklyn. As evening fell, the small party wound down. Janet kissed her daughter goodbye before leaving with Mrs. Winters, who had offered her a ride. Eleanor departed for a charity event, leaving Maxwell and Olivia alone in the garden. They sat on a bench beneath an old maple tree, watching the lights of Manhattan twinkling across the river. A gentle rain began to fall, but the pergola overhead protected them. "Do you ever miss it?" Olivia asked. "The penthouse, the power lunches, being feared in boardrooms?" Maxwell considered the question. "I miss the simplicity sometimes. Everything was clear: profit margins, strategic advantages, measurable outcomes." He took her hand. "But this complexity is worth it." "What would Catherine think of all this?" Olivia asked softly. They spoke of her often now, her memory honored rather than preserved in amber. "She would approve," Maxwell said confidently. "She always said I worked too much, took too few chances on things that couldn't be quantified on spreadsheets." The rain intensified, reminding them both of that first night. A luxury car, a ruined wedding dress, a chance encounter that had changed everything. "I never thanked you," Olivia said, "for stopping that night." "I never thanked you," Maxwell replied, "for teaching me how to start again." No grand declarations passed between them, no dramatic proposals or promises of forever. They didn't need them. What they had built, slowly, carefully, with intention, was stronger than any impulsive gesture or passionate vow. As they walked hand in hand into their shared creation, a home that was neither a showcase nor a fortress, but simply a place of warmth and possibility, they carried with them the understanding that some hearts, like some houses, require patience to rebuild, and that the most enduring structures are those built with care, allowing space for history, while creating room for whatever might come next.